The image was faded, but still sharp enough to haunt. A group of orphans posed before the boarded-up façade of Briar Glen Home for Children, dated 1903. Their expressions were unsmiling, oddly stiff. But what arrested the attention of the restoration team wasn't any of the children. It was what appeared behind them after the photo was restored. At first, it was just a blur behind the window. Then it wasn't. It started with Dr. Evelyn Rourke, a preservationist and historian from the Berkshire Institute of Archival Studies. She had been commissioned to assist the Alderbridge County Historical Society in digitizing their photo archive, a dusty collection of turn-of-the-century records from various now-defunct institutions. Among them, a deteriorating photograph labeled simply Briar Glen, Winter 1903. Evelyn had handled hundreds of such photos in her career: war relics, train depots, family portraits of settlers lost to time, but this one clung to her fingertips longer than the others. The photo was sepia-toned, poorly exposed in parts, with a patch of water damage near the lower left. The children in the frame, 12 of them, ranging in age from perhaps 4 to 15, stood in 2 uneven rows, their uniforms coarse, hair neatly parted, each bearing a tiny cloth number pinned to their chest. Behind them stood the building itself: slate roof, shuttered windows, a wrought iron gate. And above them, in the second-floor window at center right, a strange smear. It almost looked like a reflection, but it was on the inside. Assuming it was chemical damage or double exposure, Evelyn loaded the image into the Institute's imaging software. Using spectral layering and noise reduction filters, she spent 2 quiet hours teasing out detail. A cold unease crawled through her chest as she zoomed in. It wasn't a smear. The silhouette began to emerge, distinct, upright, human-shaped, but wrong. Its proportions were too narrow, too elongated. The head was slightly tilted, and where the face should have been, there was only contrastless black. No features, not even light bounce. The figure appeared to be standing still, watching the children, watching the lens, watching her. She printed a high-contrast version of the restored image and brought it to her colleague, Dr. Tobias Granger, a forensic photo analyst with 2 decades of experience in anomaly detection. He stared at it in silence for a long moment. "That wasn't on the original?" he asked quietly. Evelyn shook her head. "I thought it was chemical warping," she replied, "until I cleaned the shadow layer." Tobias leaned forward, analyzing the line of contrast between the figure and the window's interior. "There's no refraction here, no haze. It's not behind the glass, it's inside the room," he said. "Look at the edges. That's occlusion. This thing was physically present." The two exchanged a glance. Evelyn felt the temperature in the lab drop, or maybe it was just her own blood pulling back from her skin. The original plate came with little documentation, but Evelyn requested the storage log from the Alderbridge archives. The original donor was listed as Harlan Vexley, former caretaker of the orphanage from 1901 to 1904. A week later, she tracked down Harlan's retirement records, leading her to his last known residence, an abandoned cottage north of Aylesbury. The cottage had long since been boarded up, but a box of his belongings had been turned over to the Historical Society. Evelyn requested access. Inside were crumbling ledgers, journals, and a bundle of old documents wrapped in waxed cloth. One of them was a personnel record from Briar Glen Home for Children. Most of the names were faded, but one entry had been circled in red pencil. Mildred Voss, attendant, special assignment. Terminated, March 1903. Evelyn flagged the name for follow-up and turned the page. A thin envelope fell out, its contents yellowed but intact. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a hand-drawn floor plan of the orphanage, marked with several large X's. The second-floor right wing, the same window where the figure had appeared, had been crossed out 3 times. Another note, tucked into the margin of a journal, read simply, "Window locked from inside. No ladder, no prints. Children won't go near that room anymore. Voss says it's feeding off the still ones. What the hell does that mean? Still ones? Evelyn scoured the building registry. That wing had been sealed off in mid-1903 following what was called a structural collapse. But no repair records were ever filed. The collapse report was just 2 lines long. She reached out to Meredith Elling, an independent archivist and regional folklorist with a particular interest in institutional lore. Meredith agreed to meet at the photo lab that weekend. When she saw the restored image, Meredith didn't blink. "That's her," she whispered. "Who?" Evelyn asked. Meredith tapped the figure. "Mildred Voss. That's who it has to be. Or what's left of her." Evelyn's mouth went dry. "Are you telling me this woman, this shape, has shown up before?" Meredith opened her tote and pulled out a leather-bound volume of oral histories compiled in 1952. She flipped to a bookmarked page and laid it flat. An entry from a former cook at Briar Glen, age 87 at the time of interview, read, "The upstairs wing had been shut long before I was hired, but we used to hear it. Scratching, heavy breath. Once, one of the boys broke the rules and snuck up there. Said he saw a woman sitting backward in a chair with her head turned all the way round. He screamed himself mute. Never spoke again." Tobias stepped forward, pointing at the figure in the photo. "There's no chair, but look at the shoulders. They're sloped like someone's leaning forward. That head tilt, if it was reversed—" "Don't," Meredith warned. "Not here." "What do you mean?" Meredith closed the book. "You don't speak her name too often, and never in front of mirrors." That night, Evelyn had the photo sealed in a UV-blocking archive sleeve and stored in a secure drawer. She tried to sleep, but her dreams were warped. Windowless rooms, silent children, and a black figure standing too close. Always watching. Always there. By Monday morning, Evelyn Rourke was in the archives again, this time focused on locating any surviving blueprints of Briar Glen's layout. With help from Simon Paddock, the Society's records technician, she unearthed a brittle parchment map of the orphanage's original structure. The second-floor right wing had been labeled Quarantine Wing, Restricted Access, and the adjacent rooms bore handwritten annotations, Retired, Repurposed, Removed. Removed? Simon frowned, flipping the map. "Could be a clerical mark," he said, "but removed usually refers to a room no longer physically accessible." "How does a room get removed?" Evelyn asked. He hesitated. "In older institutions," he replied, "they used to brick over areas they didn't want anyone entering. Sometimes for plague prevention, sometimes other reasons." Evelyn took the map and scanned the overlay into her software that night. Lining it up with the restored photograph, she matched the window in the image to the exact location of the removed room. Same window, same anomaly, same darkness. She contacted Dr. Lillian Castle, a structural historian who had overseen the restoration of a nearby asylum. Castle reviewed the map, the notes, and Evelyn's findings with professional curiosity. "If they bricked over that room," Castle said, "it should still be traceable in the building's footprint. You'll see inconsistencies in the external wall, a seam in the brick, discoloration." The problem, of course, was that the Briar Glen Orphanage no longer stood. The building had been torn down in 1968 following a fire. The foundation, however, remained, buried beneath Alderbridge Park, now a public green space with a gazebo, swing set, and a bronze commemorative plaque that read, "Site of Briar Glen Home for Children, 1892-1968, in memory of those who found shelter here." Meredith agreed to meet Evelyn and Tobias at the site 2 days later. The 3 of them arrived before dawn, scanning the ground for any physical trace. Tobias carried a portable ground-penetrating radar, GPR, unit, a device typically used for archaeological surveys. For hours, the screen showed little more than rock and soil. But then, at the northeast corner of the park, just behind a row of hedges near the old elm tree, the device chirped. A rectangular anomaly appeared beneath the surface, roughly the size of a small room, 6 feet by 10. Tobias adjusted the gain, filtering for structural seams. "There," he said. A distinct line of density suggested a wall, not foundation, but something newer, sharper, like added stone, bricked over. Meredith crossed herself, whispering something under her breath. Evelyn placed her palm against the grass. The ground felt colder here. That night, Evelyn sat in her office staring at the photograph. The figure in the window hadn't moved, of course, but something about its posture felt more assertive now, as if the restoration had given it strength. She opened the personnel files again. Mildred Voss, terminated March 1903. She searched for incident reports, employee notes, anything. Eventually, she found a single page, nearly illegible, from a handwritten report signed by one A. Corbin, headmaster. It read, "The Voss situation cannot continue. Her presence unsettles the others. Children refuse to speak when she is near. Her voice, it lingers after she leaves the room. I've spoken to her about removing the face covering, but she insists it is for the children's protection." That it contains the morning. This woman is not right. Evelyn highlighted the phrase, "contains the morning." She forwarded the report to Meredith. Within an hour, Meredith called. She wasn't just an attendant, she said. She was what they used to call a morning keeper. It was an old European custom in some orphanages and almshouses. When children died, a mourning figure would remain in the death room for several nights, absorbing the grief so the living wouldn't be overwhelmed. "That's real?" Evelyn asked. Meredith paused. "It's folklore, but some believed the grief could attach to a person. That's why they wore veils, to keep it from spreading." Tobias, listening in on speaker, spoke next. "Could she have been buried in that room?" There was a long silence. "Or," Meredith said softly, "what if the room wasn't meant to trap her body, but the thing she became?" 3 nights later, Tobias conducted a late-night test on the print version of the photograph using a calibrated spectral projector, a method used to test pigment variances in deep archival photography. As he shifted the light angle across the image, he noticed a faint secondary shape behind the figure. Faint at first, a hand, but not the figure's hand. Smaller, child-sized, then another, and another. 12 in total. Pressed against the glass as if reaching, as if pleading. The original photo had only shown the children outside. This was something else. Evelyn enlarged the photo. The hands weren't just impressions, they had form, texture. Slight distortions in the glass revealed outlines of faces behind the original figure. Faint, mouths open. "The children," Tobias whispered. "They're in the room, not outside." "But that's impossible," Evelyn said. "We have the registry. We know who was in the photo." Meredith double-checked the records. The names listed matched the orphanage's last intake batch from early 1903. But next to each name, stamped in red ink, "Deceased, March 12, 1903. A full month before the photograph was allegedly taken. Evelyn leaned back, stomach churning. "That can't be. This picture was taken in winter. The shutter records say February." Meredith looked up, her expression pale. "No, these children weren't alive in February. They were already dead." Evelyn Rourke didn't sleep the night they found the timestamp discrepancy. She sat in her home office, the restored photograph propped upright in its protective sleeve, her laptop open beside it. The spectral scans had been inconclusive, but the GPR data, the building records, and now the stamped death dates all pointed toward one conclusion. The photo had been taken after the children had died. She needed verification. That morning, she contacted Callum Dray, a visual dating specialist at the University of Winford. Callum's specialty was forensic timeline authentication, matching environmental cues and camera model behavior to narrow down the precise period a photograph was taken. He agreed to examine the image. 3 days later, he called back. "I've gone through the emulsion breakdown," he said. "That camera model, a Richter B4, had a defect. Light seeped slightly through the left corner during cold exposure. You can see it here, that small flare on the girl's collar." Evelyn nodded, even though he couldn't see her. "That flaw only occurred during late spring to summer exposures when the humidity warped the shutter seal." Evelyn stiffened. "Spring?" she asked. Callum paused. "Yes. Late April, possibly May. But the children died in March." A silence stretched through the phone line. "Then this photo," he said carefully, "was taken after they were buried." Evelyn hung up. Later that night, Tobias brought the box from the Alderbridge Historical Society to her apartment. It contained a second photograph, one they had overlooked. It had been filed under structural documentation, not orphanage records. The photo was dated August 1903, taken by a county inspector to record the bricking of the East Wing. It showed 2 workers standing beside a wheelbarrow of stone, facing the sealed wall. Behind them, the orphanage's east-facing side. And in the shadows near the rightmost bricked window, there she was again, the same silhouette, same tilt, same position, same veil. Except now, something had changed. Evelyn took the spectral overlay from the original photo and applied it to this new one. The figure's posture was different. This time her head was turned slightly more, tilted not toward the children, but toward the camera. Toward them. Tobias noticed it too. "She's aware," he whispered. "She's not repeating a moment. She's watching." Meredith refused to come to the lab that week. She said something was wrong with the air, that her plants had wilted overnight, that the crows on her fence hadn't moved in hours. On impulse, Evelyn decided to revisit the park. She walked alone to the hedgerow where the GPR unit had detected the hidden chamber. She knelt. The grass was brittle, the soil drier than it should have been. She placed her hand flat on the earth and felt something push back. Not strongly, not physical, but a presence, a pressure. She jerked away, heart racing, breath caught in her throat, and then movement. Out of the corner of her eye and the reflective surface of her phone screen, the shape of a woman. Behind her, upright, still, just outside the range of sharpness. Evelyn turned sharply. Nothing there. She fled the park. The next morning, Tobias didn't show up for work. Evelyn called him. No answer. Texted. No reply. By evening, police had forced entry into his apartment. They found him collapsed in front of his projector, the restored orphanage photo enlarged on the wall. He was alive, but unconscious. No signs of trauma, just catatonia. His hands were balled into fists. Underneath his fingernails, dried blood from digging into his own palms. On his whiteboard, scribbled over and over in red marker, they were never outside. That night, Evelyn unrolled the original photograph one last time. She stared into the faces of the children, the blank, faraway gazes, the odd stiffness of their posture. She examined the shadows cast by the winter sun, long, soft, wrong. Then her eyes locked on the ground beneath their feet. No footprints, no compression in the snow. Not a single shadow matched the children's bodies. She increased the contrast, layered the exposure. The shadows belonged to 12 standing figures, but not the children. Taller figures, with veils. The children weren't in the photo at all. She thought of the death dates, the room that had been bricked over. The phrase, feeding off the still ones, the smaller hands in the window, the broken timestamps, the boy who screamed himself mute. This wasn't an image taken after their deaths. This was something far worse. A memory being reperformed, a ritual captured on celluloid, not for the living, but for her. The next day, Meredith delivered a sealed envelope to Evelyn's office with trembling hands. Inside was a photograph, not from the archive, but a recent printout. Security camera still. Dated 3 nights ago. Time stamped 2:03 a.m. It showed Evelyn asleep at her desk, and behind her, in the lab's reflective monitor, the unmistakable silhouette of the veiled figure, closer than ever, head turned toward the lens. No blur, no obstruction, no ambiguity. She had left the photo, and she had found her next witness. No one at the Institute could explain why Evelyn Rourke disappeared the following week. Her apartment was undisturbed, her files untouched, but in the archival lab, the original photograph had gone missing. Only one item was found on her empty chair, a new photograph, printed fresh, unlabeled. It showed a different group of orphans, this time on a stone staircase. Faint smiles, empty eyes. Behind them, in the doorway, stood a veiled woman, her head completely reversed, and beneath the print, in faint pencil, "She waits for the ones who restore what should have stayed forgotten."